I prepare to read the Imperial Tarot, to connect with the element of the Emperor that is within us all, always vigilant in the ether, despite his corporeal form being stationary on the golden throne, unmoving, unspeaking, for over 10,000 years. Still, he holds the vigil. Still, he is the lighthouse of our souls. Humanity, all of us, are under his aegis. Of course, I speak of the master of mankind, the Emperor. It is how we allow him to guide us, the drawing of cards, the interpretation thereof. He guides our hands, helps form our opinions, shows us the way, and through his tarot, we can see what was, what is, and what may yet come to be. But the last is usually so we may prevent it. For the tarot shows the stakes and import, what could happen, not what will happen. For this would remove all agency from us. The tarot only shows some of the future, a possible future. A future that we can change and do every day with our actions, our courage, our faith in humanity, if not in the divinity of he who shows us the way. It is not easy, for it requires we open ourselves to the warp, that we become attuned first. And of all the struggles of a space marine, a human, a psyker, a librarian, there will never be a greater struggle than that required to look into the warp, to harness it in any way. For to do so is to not only open oneself to all of the beauty and horror of the warp, not only to ignore and resist all of its many subtle liars and degenerate manipulators, it is also to confront oneself, one's deepest secrets, one's darkest fears, one's hidden desires. It is to stand bold and unarmored in the presence of all of these truths, and to not only control them, to rob power from them by accepting them, but to also destroy them through dint of will alone. For all of our days are defined, even more so than any of our battle brothers. They are defined by that one word: will. For we are weapons of too much power, of too much potential calamity, to ever fall to the blandishments of the dark powers. For one of us to fall is potentially worse than the entire company of our brothers in arms. The danger and damage wrought could eclipse all but the most gifted of Psykers, and all in the housing of a near immortal, near unstoppable body, that of the Adeptus Astartes, the Space Marine. So the conditioning we receive, the trials we face, the tests we undergo, they are even more severe than those of our brothers, hard as that is to conceive. For there has never been one such as the Astartes in all of the history of humanity, from the days of the Spartans to those terrible warriors of old Terra, when the techno-barbarian tyrants unleashed the full force of the genome and all of its power across the face of the cradle of humanity. Even beyond them, there has never been a warrior such as the Marine. Pure martial power to the exclusion of all else. Altered on the genetic level, manipulated and cut and changed, forced through dehumanizing and desensitizing regimes of training that only 1 in 1,000 can endure, if not less. The ultimate weapons, not required to do more than point in a direction to unleash them, in the knowledge that practically nothing in the galaxy can stay their advance, and nothing can truly stop them. Now imagine that twinned with the power to call down storms, lift entire tanks into the air and launch them, to control the very earth below them, and rent chasms at a whim. A combination I believe should never have happened in all good faith, but one that is required, fundamental to the survival of our battle brother Astartes, and through them the entire Imperium of man. For sometimes one must fight fire with fire, match power to power, and in this, we stand as the wielders of the fire, the bringers of this power to the battlefield and beyond. Where the taint of chaos is marked, where the legions of hell are abroad, where the Xenos filth twist reality with their charms and glamours, where apparitions stalk across the veil, then is the time my kind are called. We are the Librarians, the scholars and Psykers of Adeptus Astartes. Where others use bolters, melters and grenades, we use our minds, our will and our power. We take the sword to those that would brush our brethren aside. We are warriors of the same cloth, the same stripe, but of a different magnitude, of a different arena. And we must always be stronger than any of our brothers to match these trials. For only the most controlled and loyal, most disciplined mind can work the war without it befouling them. But how we are different. So many aspirants die in the first weeks. This is true of all Space Marine hopefuls. Those who would sacrifice their lives, their future, their freedom, to become the walking weapons of humanity. The Emperor's own angels of death. But even so, the rates of attrition in the hopefuls of the Librarians are even more tested, even more tried, even more likely to expire. This is as it should be, for the reasons I have given before. Because of the damage, the evil that could be done if one of us were to fall. So it is better if all in a cohort fail and die than one, even one weak link be permitted into the unbreakable chain of the Librarians. There are but two ways one can be chosen, can become a Librarian. The first is more usual. The black ships of the Sisters of Sirens ply the voids of the Imperium forever in search of mutants, but the ones of most import, of the most power. Psykers. Many do not survive the trip, the journey to their next locations. Of those that do, many are deemed too weak in warp ability or in mentality or spirituality to be able to progress, to be useful or even merely safe. They have another function. Again, for the best. Of those who are strong enough, some are taken from the herd. Those that are also physically able, potential candidates for the gene seed of the Astartes. They are trained in how to be safe by the Scholastica Psychana, barely, then brought to the chapter to which they are an aspirant. Many are brought, few, if any, pass the trials. They must be every bit as physically and mentally strong and deadly as their brother Marines, you see. The other route is more rare, but always possible. I am living proof, you see. For the gene seed that is implanted in our bodies to make us into Space Marines is directly from the templates of the genes of a Primarch, and many of them were formidably endowed with Psyker potential. Thus, amongst the Space Marines, there is the situation whereas a person with no prior ability develops it. A throwback to the might of their sires. Thus it was for me. I had never been gifted with any ability until I was near halfway through my progression toward being a Space Marine. I was then scanned by the Librarians, upon being given the gene seed. It was that day that my life changed, for it was irrefutable that I now had the gift. Many call it a curse. Many days I have believed them, but they do not see what I have to see. Do not know of many of the things I have to be all too wary of, that they need never consider. I hear the whispers of our enemies, feel them defecating on the very walls of reality, can almost taste the corrupting powers as I encounter them or hunt them. But I would not trade it for anything. For in many ways I am the most connected to the Emperor, for only we Librarians can even begin to conceive of what it is he has to, go through every second of every day. In this knowledge I feel blessed, and I am honoured. The struggle is worth it. The ability to be a greater tool of his justice, his will, his plan for humanity, is more than recompense for all that we endure above and beyond that of even our brothers. We are his Librarians. We bring down the Emperor's own wrath on his enemies. So more should be expected of us. It is fair. But let us go back to today. I felt them break into reality less than a day ago. It began this morning. The Mandeville point opened and something came out. Ships arrived from out of the warp. We all felt it as one, so attuned to the warp are we, the Librarians of the Crimson Vigils chapter. A chapter founded specifically to hold vigil over this system in specific, for it is tainted and must be watched for exactly this sort of thing. This sort of evil. We approach the world at full speed, our battle barge thundering through the system already. We are always ready. The captain looks to me as we prepare to embark. I know his one question. Do we have time? Once, we would be certain that our action time was more than safe, but not now. Not since the opening of the Great Rift. This is the third attempt on the planet in so many decades. Each time the worshippers of the dark powers, the cultist or traitor scum that always attempt to do their god's foul bidding, they have gotten closer to completion. By hours, or by even days. Now, despite how fast we reacted, we cannot be sure. So I check. I looked at my most important relic, that which is the entire reason for our chapter to exist, the Sword of Magellan. For on the sword are the runes, linked glyphs to those that contain that which is held on the fifth planet of the system, where a thing of evil is imprisoned. A barrier that can never be brought down, a cell that can never be allowed to be opened. I draw the sword and then push my will, my power into its length. I mention the tendrils of my aura flowing down my arm and wrapping themselves around the hilt of the blade. Then, when I feel I have enough energy there, I push it up the hilt. The force sword comes to life, crackling with power almost in parody of a power weapon. But it is not the same. It is not some ancient technology or field of negatively charged particles that sheath this weapon, but the unfettered energies of the warp. My power. As the power crashes down the ancient artifact, runes light up, but not nearly enough, and less than last time even. They have taken down more than half of the protective keys, the bindings. We cannot tarry, I say to my superior, the captain. He nods, and with a flourish of his hand, the loading of our men into drop pods proceeds apace. It was a choice between landing craft and pods, but we do not have the time for a perfect strategic landing and approach. We must go down their throats immediately. They must be stopped. We must be swift and utterly without mercy. I go down to the surface with the captain, in his pod. As we hurtle towards the planet, our ship's scanners confirm to all of us now in the pod that my instincts were correct. They have come in numbers hitherto unseen. Hence why they have already torn down so many of the glyphs and wards in such short order. Power breaks power, and they certainly have the numbers to generate the power required to make this easier for them. I make my knowledge clear to the captain, and our ship, the Emperor's Wrath, proceeds to lay down a spread of bombardment to cull the herd, to take away some of their advantage. I can only hope it is enough. We slam down as the fire ceases, so precise that they fired around our ships as we plummeted head first towards the site. The landing jets are jarring as they fire at the very last minute to slow us down before impact. We hit hard nonetheless. Charges on the doors explode, and in less than 2 seconds from impact we are out. The honor guard that accompanies the captain and I clear a zone around us. Pods are slammed down all around us as well, and the enemy is in utter disarray. They were packed so thick that some were actually burnt or crushed by the pods, but now they run. Many run away from us, many more toward us. Fanatical and unhinged eyes blaze in their skulls as they throw themselves at the bolters and heavy weapons, the flamers and melters that are sprinkled amongst the units around us. Chainswords screech their exultation to the skies as they go to work. Near 100 Marines and less than a score of pods are now tearing and shooting, blasting and barreling their way forward. On. We must push on. Whilst all of this happens around me, I concentrate on that which is my element, my part to play. I can feel the next ward of the prison crumble without even needing to see the sword. I begin to hear the hissing and scratching of the things that are massing on the other side of the veil. Those legions of evil that are salivating at the chance to break through. For just as the wards keep something in, so too do they keep things out. Like a shadow image superimposed on the real, I can see the things of the warp as if they are almost here, almost able to push through. They are all around us, beneath us, above us. If I fail to stop the ritual, we are all dead. With us, this entire system and then beyond. The captain sees my brief cut of a hand in our simple battlefield language, and knows the time is now almost run out. He raises his sword aloft, and all who see it then move towards us. He, the tip of a fighting wedge, now cutting into the enemy. The thousands around us mean nothing, for we can deal with them. My brothers can cull them all, given that one thing: time. I move up in the centre of the wedge, some paces behind the tip, as it ploughs into the centre of the enemy, toward the ancient and alien edifice in front of us. My brothers carve a path for me, and when we reach the stairs, we push up them to the very doors. We realize that there are no cultists now in front of us any longer, just the doors. The wedge breaks, and a corridor forms. My brothers to the left and to the right of me. I charge through this gap, and through the doors. The hasty glyphs put up by those inside child's play for me to breach as I run. The clamour of the battle behind me. It is only I and 2 honor guard who enter, as the captain and our men hold back the teeming insane hordes outside. I use my sight. I can see their souls through the solidity of reality by glimpsing them in the warp. There are only 3. They are in the central chamber, before the very bars of the jail, before the locks and glyphs that they are now attempting to force down. I lead, and do not even miss a beat when I cross the threshold to the room and engage them immediately. The 2 guards that followed me immediately fire at the 3 men who stand within a complex set of circles. Their bolter rounds slam into the shield and seem to do nothing, but as I have told them before, they keep firing. Each time a bolter hits that shield, those inside use more power to construct it or to hold it in place, thus giving them less to perform their ritual, or less to throw at us in whatever way their twisted minds will form the warp into. One of the cultists turns and attempts to slay my brothers by hurling lightning at them. I stand in the way and allow my psychic hood to do most of the heavy lifting in deconstructing the energies he has unleashed. I finish the job by absorbing the last of the blast before turning it back on the firer. I am a librarian, a psyker who is also a marine. My mind is iron, my will adamant, my ability to control and to harness the warp far beyond these cultist scum, gifted by the dark gods all know. My retort crashes into their shield and cracks it like an egg. Shards of force, invisible to my guards, smash and then explode inwards under the power of my assault. The force then collides with 2 of them and picks them up and launches them into the walls behind. I do not need enhanced senses to hear their skeletons shatter as they embed in the wall. Only one is left. He was chanting, was the leader, the master. He had his own personal shield. Now he is alone. No cultists, no acolytes, just him. And despite his wide grin, despite his darkened eyes shining at me, I can feel his fear. He raises hands and molds reality with lines of energy, forming a web before him that he then slams towards me with an outstretched push of his hands. He moves faster than I had anticipated. I can see he's the reason the runes have come down so swiftly. Yet despite his speed, despite his ability, I simply cut the lines of force as they come towards me with the same effort I would in putting my hand through a spider's cobweb. I untangle his energies and allow them to flow harmlessly past me. My guards are not so lucky. As the lines hit them, they cut straight through with the ease of a power sword through Grok's hide. My brothers fall to pieces behind me, literally. But there was nothing for it. No way I could save them and do what I now do. For the cultist, this witch, had to keep concentrating on the pattern for it to be used on them. And in that one moment, I strike. Unleash a bolt of such force that he cannot react in time. His last vision is the dead Marines behind me sliding into segments on the ground. And me. My energies strike him and he is surrounded by them like a cocoon. His silhouette at the centre of the light. But not for long. For within 3 heartbeats, the shadow at the centre, his form, shrinks and shrinks as the light I have created burns him away. until there is nothing left. I stride forwards and kick the candles over, break the many circles they had erected. The ritual is over, the last seals protected. As the massacre of the cultists proceeds outside, I begin to reinstate the protections again, as I have done twice before, and others of my order have done hundreds of times before. The captain does not even need to ask how things have gone. He knows, for he is still there. If I had failed, that would certainly not be the case. We have been victorious this day, but it will never be over. For chaos is a part of us, of humanity, so we'll never truly die. All we can do is hold the line, hold the vigil, every day, for all eternity. Welcome, gentle listener. I am Baldermort, your faithful servant, and I wish to introduce you to the forces, factions, and main units of the Warhammer 40k universe, the grim darkness of the far future, where there is no time for peace, there is only time for war. And today, we are to discuss, as an introduction only, the Psykers of the Adeptus Astartes, the Space Marines, those that are known as Librarians. I say an introduction only so adamantly this time, as I fully intend to expand on the different abilities, approaches and histories of the Librarians of the many legions and the chapters that sprang from them. And so, as usual, for the very basics, let us lean on existing wisdom. To quote, Librarians. Eyes blazing and fists crackling with roiling energies, Space Marine Librarians stride into battle to destroy their foes. Some hurl blasts of warp force that crush their victims to paste, while others twist the flow of time itself to revitalize their brothers with incredible surges of dynamism. However they choose to fight, all Librarians are powerful Psykers, harnessing the potent mutation they bear as a force to defend humanity. The Imperium is eternally vigilant for the taint of mutation. Space Marine chapters are even more careful to ensure their gene seed is not polluted. Apothecaries rigorously screen potential recruits for any sign of genetic deviation, but not all mutation is physical. Psychic talent is a mutation too, and is at once the most dangerous and the most useful. The training of a chapter's nascent Psykers is one of the many responsibilities of the Librarians, a process that has a shockingly high attrition rate. The aspirant must not only endure everything a normal Space Marine recruit would, but also have a strong enough spirit to withstand the molding of his mind. A recruit must be taught how to hone and wield his powers, and how to protect himself from the Imperium's innate hazards. A Librarian faces 1,000 enemies before he even goes to war. To the creatures of the warp, his mind is a choice prize. Each day is a walk along a precipice, and a false step can see him tumble into madness. If a recruit survives his rigorous testing, he joins the Librarians as Lexicanum, rising through the ranks to become Codicia, then Epistolary, or perhaps even Chief Librarian. He will use his abilities to pierce the warp and provide the means for interstellar communication, as well as to identify others of his own kind. He will judge them as he was himself once judged, scrutinizing potential candidates for frailty of mind or spirit. A moment's weakness can unleash untold evils, and vigil must be kept against any wavering of purpose. In addition to training psychic recruits, the Librarius is also charged with recording the history of the chapter. Librarians hold a functionary rank, describing their role within the Librarius as well as their position within the chapter's hierarchy. Lexicanums, for example, are responsible for preparing reports of battle for the chapter's records, whilst Codicias provide a strategic overview of the whole theatre of a war. After decades of study, a Librarian will be well versed in the history and lore of his chapter, and both his wisdom and counsel will be highly regarded by the master of the chapter. Most Librarian battle disciplines focus on enhancing their already formidable combat prowess. Many use their psychic powers to throw powerful energy bolts, project force fields, or increase their might to demigod-like proportions. Some can step outside of time, slow the enemy's movements, or redirect bullets with the sheer power of their minds. Even so, the most skilled Librarians can master more subtle gifts, learning how to read the Emperor's tarot and sense the movement of demons through the warp. A Librarian can feel the psychic shockwaves that herald the arrival of a spacecraft from the warp, or the turmoil they leave in their wake as they depart real space. In all of the Imperium, there are few greater warrior mystics than Space Marine Librarians, with their potent combination of the prowess of an Adeptus Astartes warrior and the unearthly powers of the warp. Tools of the Librarians. Space Marine Librarians can make use of potent and specialized weaponry that helps them channel their powers, protect their minds, and defy the malefic manifestations of the foe. Each wears a complex techno-arcane cowl called a psychic hood, which incorporates psionic baffles, contra-empiric siphons, and null circuits. These devices shield the Librarians' minds to some degree from the attention of predatory warp entities, and also enhance the abilities to unmake the psychic powers of their foes. Meanwhile, many Librarians wield force weapons, be they axes, swords, or staves. Threaded through with amplifying psycho-circuitry, these weapons channel the raw psychic might of the Librarian's mind, blazing with soul-obliterating power and striking with enough force to hack a tank in two. End quote. And so we see the majesty and might, but also the inherent danger that comes from including Librarians in the forces of the chapters. It is inarguable that they are sometimes the exactly right weapon to use against many a foe, from fighting fire with fire, as used against Psykers or Neverborn or Eldar witches, or as the hard counter, as when they are deployed against Necrons and Catan, or the Tau. But we shall get into the nuances of their use, their histories, the Edict of Nicaea, and how it was revoked, where they come from, and how they are deployed by each of the chapters as time goes by. I have been Baldermort, your faithful servant. I hope you've enjoyed this brief introduction to the Librarians of the Space Marines, and if so, that you will consider liking and subscribing. If you do, then please hit the notifications button as well, as I would not want you to miss out. Now, no matter what you do today, do try to make some time for fun. Toodaloo.